And we'll get going. So standard agenda for Arborist calls, quick welcome, and then we do research and implementation status updates from Zebra and on Zebra D, Zcash D. And then we have a kind of a general presentation section where we talk about different topics. Usually winds up being a good bit of open discussion. So today Nathan had a few thoughts on improving upgrades. Then we've been, from the last meeting, we're going to carry over and talk a bit more about Pollard. So we kind of have a Pollard Primer, we called it, for lack of a better term. And then again, period of open discussion. And then we just have, just a few minutes for kind of open announcements, action items, to-dos for next meeting and kind of a wrap up. So.
Stephen, I have a question actually.
Okay.
So from the last meeting, my understanding was that the agenda was that we were going to kind of follow up with a lot of our questions around Halo and how this would impact the community, and this agenda doesn't seem to reflect that kind of agenda that we talked about last time.
Yeah, so Pollard Primer I could have probably named it better, but it just kind of talks a bit about Pollard in more detail, and then there's a section on partner adoption or partner considerations or whatever you'd like to call it, which kind of covers all the ecosystem. So, and we talk about in the Pollard Primer, kind of the background, rationale, risk, and things of that nature. So I believe that we'll cover it in there. That was the intent anyway, and certainly if there's questions anyone has, then we can certainly answer those as we go as well.
Okay. I'm going to grab our agenda from last time and just to make sure we're able to hit those points.
Okay,
thanks.
Sounds good. Okay, moving forward. So the purpose of these meetings really quickly, just to make Zcash protocol development more accessible for a wider set of participants and provide more transparency for the community at large, folks that are interested in what's going on at the protocol level. We have several other community calls with a different focus, but this one is specific to protocol development. Anybody can participate. Any member of the community that's interested in learning more about development can register and attend. If there's something that you want to present, feel free to email me. Usually, worst case, we're a couple of meetings out from being scheduled, but we'll definitely can work you in at the right time and get you on the agenda. And with that, we move into kind of the status updates. First, Zebra D. And I'd like to preface this part with a huge congratulations to the Zcash Foundation. I know Deirdre will mention that, but on the alpha launch of Zebra D. So yeah, applause all around for that great work.
Thank you. I'll keep this brief, but yes, we have tagged our first alpha release for Zebra. And by alpha, it does, what does it do? It will sync the entire mainnet chain from Genesis to tip and keep up with the tip for days so far since in our testing. It is validating proof of work. It's validating a couple of consensus rules. It is not validating all of them yet. It is not validating proofs yet. This release, the goal is to get all of the pieces working together, getting it into the hands of people to make sure that it works. We can follow and communicate and participate nicely with other peers in the Zcash network. We found and fixed a couple of little nitty bugs in the past week, basically, to make sure that we could keep up with the last 100,000 or so blocks consistently on mainnet. And then when we got to a nice stable place, we decided this is a good alpha. So I'll share my screen just to show you where you can, I can't share my screen. Yeah, there we go. Just so you can see where you can get it. This is my narrow screen, but if you don't know where to get it, it's github.com Zcash Foundation /Zebra. We've clarified our run instructions a little bit since 2 days ago. This is the basic to build and run ZebraD.start. And then if you are an engineer and you want more details, and most of the people on this call are, we have our extensive documentation at zebra.zfoundation.org, including like if you want the latest builds, you will do cargo build and things like that, rather than pulling and installing with the locked dependency file. So like this is closer to what you would think of as a release binary. This will pull down and build, you know, the hard coded dependencies that are guaranteed to build and run Zebra. But, you know, Rust developers, you can clone the repo and you can do, you know, a cargo build and you can do cargo fetch and all that sort of stuff and see what happens if you have a slightly fresher version of some of our dependencies. This is the tag. It is the only tag in the repo. Please give it a whirl. It should report bugs. It should have a nice user experience when you're running it in your terminal. So like we try to auto generate a report URL if it panics and say like, please just copy and paste this into your browser, and it'll auto populate a template for a GitHub issue, including the stack trace and the span trace, because we use tracing spans to give us as much information as we were automatically able to collect about your panic. So far in the past 2.5 days, we have not had any bugs reported that we had not heard about before. We've only had like a couple of reports, and they were all things that we are known issues, and we are working. We either have a fix incoming or a plan to address. So please try it. It is an alpha, but please try it and let us know what you think. The next milestone for Zebra is finishing all the validation. So we have all these pieces that are like ready to be hooked in, but they weren't quite done, to finish validating all of our Groth 16 proofs, to do batch validation of red jub signatures and ed 25519 signatures. We're kind of had some of that in there to just do them real quick, but we pulled them out because, you know, we just wanted to get a bunch of other stuff done. And all of the rest of the consensus rules that we haven't completed yet. Some of those were implemented and we pulled them out because we wanted to make sure everything else was not getting in the way. Yeah, that is the next milestone, is finishing. So instead of just syncing, we can sync and validate the whole thing. And so that is the next big chunk of work for Zebra. And we're hopefully to get a lot of that knocked out in the first quarter of this year, of 2021. So
Right. Okay.
Questions?
Ooh, I have a question.
Yes.
What is the plan for like release scheduling? Will you target features, and then once those features are implemented, release them, or will you aim for a date or?
So our original plan, or at least we have a sketched out design document, an RFC in our internal parlance of our release process. We're planning to follow the NU update schedule, or an approximation thereof, but with minor versions. So major versions will be network upgrades, or, you know, something of equivalent significance. But minor and patch versions probably being released very frequently. Yeah, the way that we do it now is every time our CI passes and we merge to our main branch, we build and run instances of Zebra that connect to the mainnet and see if they panic. We have event loggers, so they see if anything goes wrong, we automatically get alerted. We're probably going to do something like that indefinitely, and then we'll have a human basically greenlight any minor or patch versions and say, we think this is a good version of, you know, a pre-existing released NU major upgrade. And for those Zebra nodes that we maintain live on the network, we'll probably push out an auto update. Those are things that don't change consensus rules, obviously, but would have bug fixes, patches, that sort of thing. We have to nail down the nitty-gritty specifics of that, but we're probably going to be doing that probably by our next milestone, or our next beta, with it, because that'll include a lot more consensus rules and all of the validation criteria. So stay tuned.
Thanks. What's the, is there a name for the RFC or a number
Oh, I'll give you a link.
or a link? Even better.
We started on this literally in September, and have been working on code in the meantime. So, yay! Any other questions? No, let it move on. Cool, great.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, and again, huge congratulations to everyone involved. I know that's
Yeah, congratulations.
a
It's
lot of work.
really fast.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Give me one moment. I'll try to find the slides again. It's always a challenge with Zoom. Okay, I think I have it. Go back into presentation mode. We'll step through a quick Zcash update. Yeah, so just general announcements since our last Arborist call. These are all linked on our blog posts or our blog, so you can go check those out. A great ecosystem development, Unstoppable Wallet was the first wallet to launch that actually integrated our SDKs into a multi-coin wallet already. So kudos to the wallet team at ECC, kudos to Unstoppable, everyone in the community that helped, with testing and things of that nature. But yeah, so proud to see that. That's kind of the whole point of developing those SDKs, as well as, of course, what we call the ECC reference wallets as well. We have a blog post on the pasta curves for Halo 2 and beyond. We'll talk a bit about that and when we get to the Pollard section. We published a Zcash Gitcoin grants round one retro. Last Arborist call, we mentioned the fact that was kicking off. So we have a retro out there based on that. I would say overall a pretty good success. A number of really interesting projects, which would be familiar to most everyone on this call, got some degree of funding to kind of help them continue development. And then the growth team published an ecosystem 2020 recap, which is a really great read that just highlights some of the engineering accomplishments, but more important, like the ecosystem itself, developments of the wallets entering the market, exchange adoption, some community-based programs that we sponsor. So it's a great read. Again, all linked off of our blog, so check those out. Yeah, the big thing from a Zcash perspective is Canopy activated on November 18th. I won't go through the list of everything that was in there. The primary thing, of course, was the dev fund related zips. And that was successful. We had no issues related to the activation itself. All the dev fund zips, all that work was implemented. As best we can tell, it works fine. So everything's working good. So it went off without a hitch. General status update on Zcash. We put out a couple of releases. Version 4.10 was the first release we put out that leveraged Clang. And by the way, Sean, Strat, anyone, just hop in there and add any additional info here that I might leave out or gloss over. But 4.10 was the first release we put out that leveraged Clang and C++17. We pretty quickly realized that optimization levels between GCC and C++17 or Clang are a little bit different. So we hit some performance regressions and immediately put out a 4.11 with the right optimization level that took care of those cases. Yeah, so we updated the dev fund zips. We talked about Bootstrap a couple calls ago. Information on our blog about that as well to reflect Bootstrap ownership. I know Andrew was involved in, I think maybe even authored those changes. But at any rate, we updated those zips to reflect Bootstrap ownership. On the Halo 2 front, we made steady progress on zero knowledge and lookup arguments. Derek cut a new release of the Zcash spec 2020.1.15. We completed the curve selection for Pollard. That was the call out I made under announcements for the pasta curves. So it's two curves, Polis and Vesta, and collectively called the pasta curves, taking the PA from Polis and the STA from Vesta. We're already working with other projects for use and adoption, submitted a PR to ArcWorks for the pasta curves as well. And then, yeah, more updates on the Halo 2 front, made significant progress on kind of the API and the crate structure. And that's really just to help with kind of the understanding of the internal structure of Halo 2 and how it works and how the components fit together. Data access API, we've talked about some before, but it's essentially an improvement to the SDKs. We'll just kind of leave it at that high level. That's in use now by the ECC reference wallets. and they're testing that out. But it's the goal, of course, like the SDKs in general, is to foster development throughout the ecosystem and make it easier. So that's the significance there. So yeah, upgrade schedule, release schedule. We're here at the dark dashed line. What we have coming up next is release 4.2.0. We'll put that out roughly the 18th, 19th of December. We're on a rough 6-week cadence, or sorry, 6-week cadence for releases that EOS halt after roughly about 16 weeks. Kind of a quick year in review. We've put out 8 releases this year and 2 network upgrades, Hardwood and Canopy. So overall, been a pretty good year, pretty successful path. So, let's see, and that's it. So let me just back up a slide. So I'm going to look at the chat, see if there's any questions.
Yeah, question about the pasta curves.
Okay. Well, we're about to get to Pollard, so that would be, I think, a perfect time to chat about that.
Okay.
Yep. And then okay. Anything else I missed there? What's going? Okay. So we'll go to the next section. And Nathan just had I think 3 slides on, thoughts on improving upgrades and things of that nature. So we'll cover that quickly. Then we'll get into Pollard. So Nathan, you just want me to step through these for you? I'll be glad to.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to. By the way, I just saw the Foundation blog post about the 2021 roadmap like 30 minutes ago, and I thought it was really good. And that feels like a good segue into this. Actually, I wanted to check. Can we go back a slide maybe and ask if anyone from the Foundation wants to give like a 5-minute summary of that blog post?
Sure. Top level, finishing Zebra to be a fully validating node. Second, that's like the very immediate continuing now, first thing that we're focusing on. 2, we have a proposed client infrastructure, aka wallet support. That'll probably be like the 3rd milestone before we consider moving Zebra from a like in progress pre-release to a stable release, an MVP release, if you will, because it'll be basically parity with the big features that Zcash G offers, which is like a fully piece of software that lets you send money. You don't need other software to send money, but we're planning to integrate with Zec Wallet for your desktop as well. So you can use a GUI or you can use our separate binary, our separate command line tool, Zebra client, Z client, to communicate with your Zebra node. Beyond that, we are trying to work on a proposal that's currently just a germ in our mind about supporting clients or supporting users and use cases that are usually supported by the Light client protocol. But instead of needing another server to do the Light client protocol, we want to add messages to the Zcash peer-to-peer network protocol that has the data structures, the compact block, compact transaction data structures that Light Wallet protocol has, and build them into Zebra or build them into our Zebra-network library so that you can do all of the wallet side Light Wallet blockchain scanning using those light bandwidth data structures, but just by talking to a Zcash node, such as Zebra to start with, but hopefully others that speak these messages. So you would take Zebra-network library, build it into your wallet. It would talk to another Zcash node that understands the Zcash network protocol. You can ask it for compact blocks and you can ask it for compact transactions, and you don't need another server. So that's one of the other things that we're looking into. We're looking into hiring. We want to hire more engineers for ourselves. We want to hire through the formerly known MGRC, now the ZOMG, open source developers. There's at least one open source developer that's been helping us with Zebra.
So that's how you pronounce it.
and we have others that are interested in doing work, specifically on helping us flesh out our RPC. We've already had plans to flesh out our RPC layer in Zebra, but we may have someone externally who's willing to devote hours to make that even better, or at least maybe do it for us. And then another one of the things that, let me actually pull out the blog post to make sure I'm not missing anything, because I was just looking at it like just before the meeting. Yeah, so basically Zebra work, some RPC work, light wallet analog work. Part of Zebra development will be user testing of Zebra, but also interviewing with exchanges to see what pain points exchanges are feeling, and how we can help them with shielded adoption. We have a dialogue going with Gemini, because Gemini is the first shielded withdrawal supporting exchange. And we want to know what went well for them and what we could do to help their supporting shielded withdrawal or supporting shielded Zcash period easier for them, or what pain points that they're looking into. So we're going to continue doing that into the future, especially with respect to Halo. Basically, if Halo is going to be a part of the Zcash protocol, we want to know how hard that will be for our partners and exchanges to support, and also for wallets to support, or for anyone else who's trying to support shielded Zcash to support. Another one of the things that our board is very interested in is investigating user-defined assets. We want the Zcash protocol to be more flexible, so you could do more things with it. People already try to do a lot of things with, such as the shielded memo field. When you're sending money back and forth, they try to take like a couple hundred bytes of space and do interesting things with it all the time, because they're bootstrapping off of the privacy properties of Zcash, the protocol, even if the money part is sort of like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like that's kind of just a channel for them. Maybe UDAs are kind of a solution to that, trying to make that more fully supported. So we're going to devote resources to investigating this and trying to get a design together. We were originally going to say, like, we're going to build this in 2021, but we don't have a concrete design yet, or like an approach yet. So we're going to invest resources into having a design and an approach to it in 2021. We are going to investigate how we can do this. And then I think the last one is basically like how it dovetails off the light wallet, light client stuff, is like Zcash in both its design and its resource usage restricts usage in some use cases. Some of them are low bandwidth devices. Some of them are privacy specific applications that don't quite work if you have to bundle a full node into your application. So the light wallet protocol stuff, or like trying to get rid of the need of a full-on light wallet protocol by by achieving the same goals with the peer-to-peer protocol, and using a light library to talk the peer-to-peer protocol, working with people who that would be useful to. Some of that might be wallet developers or other developers. That's, I think I'm not missing anything.
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. And by the way, kudos for doing that on the fly. That was excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been.
Yeah, sorry to throw you under the bus.
That you're lucky, because that got published, and I was looking over it like just before the call, so it's a little bit fresh in my brain.
Good, very good, excellent job.
Right. Nice.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
let me fast forward, Nathan, back to
Cool.
these slides here.
How is my?
Okay.
Am I choppy still?
A little bit.
Oh no. Okay.
It seems okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Bear with me.
Can
I think
everybody
that was
still see my screen okay?
yes.
Okay.
So right, for this section, I wanted to kind of step back from talking about like roadmap or protocol upgrades or anything, and talk a little bit about how we make decisions, like the royal we, as a group involving multiple organizations. And I don't have answers here. I just wanted to sort of bring people's attention to sort of multiple layers of the stack, so that it's on everyone's mind, and we can continue conversations about those as we move forward. So one of the first things I wanted to point out is ECC and ZF both are wearing multiple hats all the time. And so sometimes some of those responsibilities, when done well, like they have different requirements or focuses. And when you bundle them all together, it's necessary to figure out how to balance some of these demands that come from different responsibilities. And so I just brainstormed here like 6 things that seem somewhat distinct to me. So the first one would be protocol stewards, and that might mean different things to different people, but one way I think of it is there's like guardians of the protocol, and they're just making sure the protocol is resilient, safe for users, and doesn't get changed like unduly or without good reason. And then another hat we both have, this is why I wanted to bring up that blog post because it fits really well here, is in describing visions and how and what kind of roadmaps we want to achieve those visions about Zcash. And I'm really, really excited about the idea of having multiple organizations. ZOMG also has started doing a bit of this, where we're all sort of posting, hey, here's what Zcash could become. Here's a vision. We think it's plausible and we want to go there. And I think the more of those there are for Zcash with like genuine, authentic advocates behind them, the better it will be. So kudos to that blog post. Then there's this third piece, governance institutions. Like we need to figure out how to like ensure we have the organization and the mechanics to legitimately govern development of the protocol. And there's a lot there, and I think we've all seen a lot over the past year, especially. And I feel like we've really come a long way on this front also. And then meanwhile, both ECC and ZF, we develop consensus code. Furthermore, we tend to be feature advocates, especially historically ECC, and now it sounds like with the Zcash Foundation roadmap and their new tech platform, I'm hearing about looking for use cases that can use like what Zcash's strengths with other kinds of privacy use cases or protocols, and figuring out, okay, can we tie those together and streamline them well? Or the other big example was user-defined assets. And then over at ECC, we've been talking about Pollard. So these are examples of potential features that we're advocating for. And by the way, there's other people advocating outside of our organizations too. And I hope to see more of them showing up to these meetings and participating. And then we also need to be engaging with users and community and understanding what helps them, what they need, and how we can help make Zcash useful for them. So I just wanted to highlight how, yeah, we both orgs have to balance all these concerns as we collaborate together, and hopefully more orgs will be showing up. Like I was curious if ZOMG will start sending like an official liaison here or not. And I think pointing out the different responsibilities can help, because at different times we might be more focused on one area of responsibility than others. And so just for fun, kind of, in the last, like maybe the last Arborist call and this Arborist call, it seems like ECC has been advocates of this feature. We're like, hey, Pollard, this is awesome. Let us tell you about it. We are really excited and putting our effort into it. Oh, yeah, this is a little bit confusing, but in this section here, I'm talking more about protocol stewardship. So let's proceed on to the next slide. So here's a bunch of questions, and I don't have good answers for most of this right now in this presentation. And also I've seen the Zcash Foundation doing some of this with their blog posts. So like the first section, goals and measurement, like what should we be doing and how do we know if we're succeeding? Those are huge topics. And I love the fact that the foundation has put out these blog posts and ECC should be doing similar stuff. I think for us, it might be like first quarter next year. You might be seeing something more like that. And this is going to be a continued conversation that we'll be having. And again, I also want to see more participants showing up to discuss these questions. And then for the process, kind of zooming in a little bit to the protocol, I think we need to continue clarifying and refining like what is the process for advocating for feature changes to the protocol, and then in addition to what is that process, what are the requirements for the feature advocates? Like, what do they need to bring to the table? And I think recently, like in the last meeting and hopefully in this meeting, that is sort of where we've been collaborating with Pollard. Like, what do we need to know about Pollard before we can decide it's like ready to be proposed as a good feature to the broader Zcash community? And so like maybe one example might be we need to know that it provides benefits for users and it won't hinder adoption, and hopefully it'll spur adoption, right? So that's sort of a preview. And then governance, this is the tricky hard part. So once we have sort of the process and the presentations out on the table, then how do we make the decision, the royal we, and that's a tricky thing, and we're gonna figure that out as we go. And I mean, we already have structure and processes and sort of a history, so we're not starting from scratch, but I think we can always be iterating and improving on these. So now zooming into to the requirements for what do we need to know about a proposed feature before like what is the minimum bar we need before we can even begin discussing should it go into a network upgrade or not. And in this slide, I was just going to propose, since for this meeting at least, or maybe for the next month or two, or for NU5, if ECC is saying, hey, let's work on Pollard and adding that to the protocol, then we're largely playing the role of feature advocates. And so if we're also going to be doing protocol stewardship, we're wearing two hats, and we need to be aware of that. And I think ECC, the foundation can and has been doing a good job of sort of being a steward, asking how we know this is a good idea, how feasible is it, when can it happen, and those kinds of questions. So these slides were all just about framing and sort of acknowledging the challenges we have on multiple layers here, and I hope everyone's encouraged that we're going to continue talking about all of these things as we proceed with this feature or other features like UDAs or things like that.
So is this an official capacity that the Z Foundation, as a protocol steward, reviews the proposal by the ECC that is Pollard, or basically, is this encoding something specific into how things are approved as they go into Zcash, the protocol, and how does that interface with zips? Or is this kind of like a vague kind of vague. Like, okay.
I'm just saying, yeah, this is not a proposal for like, I mean, it could become one, but in this slide, that's not at all the case. I'm just saying that seems to be our focuses at the moment. And it makes sense to sort of call out which roles we're sort of playing momentarily. But for example, I think you know, the zip process will remain unchanged unless we agree to modify that or extend it. So that was my thinking, but that's a great question. Do you
I
have
really
a
like this
follow-up
framing of
question?
separate roles. It reminds me of how I've seen zip editors speak like this, like speaking in my capacity as a zip editor, or
Yeah.
you know, this has to go through this review or something. And so I like the way that you've identified several different and complementary roles. I pretty much agree with all of them, that all of those are present. And so even just as a simple conversational flow control, like you could imagine mentioning in which capacity you advocate for some statement. So I like the framework, fuzzy as it is. I think it's a nice guideline.
Yep. Are there other thoughts or questions about this general framework?
I think this is good in general to basically be like, okay, if you are a proposer, then as you know, people looking at your proposal, we say we think X, Y, and Z, or it, you know, we think it requires this, or we would like more information on this piece or something like that. I think that's completely fine and kind of, you know, does kind of make put into to better words sort of like what we kind of do for lots of zips and ideas and stuff like that. I think that's fine. I think any concerns about Halo or Pollard are timing.
Yeah.
Are not about the specific proposal itself. We think generally the specific proposal, you know, it's fresh and experimental crypto. Maybe we would like a little bit more cryptanalysis or something like that. But like generally those are not anyone's concerns. The proposal in its proposal box is good, is nice, it's good cryptography. We generally understand the places it needs to integrate and things like that. It's mostly about why now? Why can't we deprecate something else?
Mhm.
Is there an urgent need to get this into NU5? If there is, why? And
Right.
can we get more information about the downsides of pushing it into NU5? Or can we get some more information about the upsides of later than NU5?
Okay.
Or
That's good to hear.
tying it to deprecating other stuff so that the net complexity of supporting yet another address type and shielded pool is understood.
Cool. Let's
Sorry, I just want to build a little bit on what Deidre just said. So I think
Yeah.
both getting more information, but also sort of talking about our own experiences and looking at Hilo and our concerns about what this pushes off. So this isn't so much a question, it is like a question, and also there's some things we're worried that will get pushed off by this rush. So
got it. Cool. The next part digs into Pollard more specifically. And if you're unfamiliar with Pollard, it is a feature for Zcash which would rely on Halo 2, just in case anyone needs that context. So in this section, we try to talk about give an overview of like the benefits and drawbacks to the feature. I don't know if it talks much about the timeline. So I think, Stephen, if we want time to dig into the timeline, then we might want to go faster on some
Sure. I
pieces of
mean,
this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
yeah, I can. I mean, I personally can blow through these really quickly because I don't understand a ton about them. But Sean and Dara can definitely, or sorry, Sean and Strat, I'm not sure Dara has joined us. I can't see the list of participants. But anyway, it's just kind of some background, rationale, risk, you know, mitigations, et cetera. And then again, a slide on like ecosystem and the partners and what it means for them. Background for those that might not be as familiar. And again, Halo team, hop in here at any point and add some context. Pollard introduces a new address type, shielded pool transaction format, and an underlying zero knowledge proof circuit, which the key part is does not rely on a trusted setup. Pollard's functionality and design is intentionally almost identical to Sapling. Pollard is deployed on the Halo 2 stack, which doesn't, again, require trusted setup. It has a new shielded pool and the same cross-pool turnstile design and UX as for Sapling. And the plan is, our hope is for Pollard to meet all of the, quote, ready for feature selection requirements to be considered a candidate for an NU5. So that's kind of the thought. Rationale: by removing reliance on a trusted setup, you eliminate an entire class of counterfeiting risk. It improves safety for current users and spurs adoption by new users for which trusted setup vulnerability is ideologically unacceptable. If you look at the ceremonies that occurred for Sprout and Sapling, I think logically you'd come away from that and go, okay, the chance of any kind of compromise is virtually nil. But ideologically, people like, oh, Zcash, trusted setup, that's a problem for me without ever researching it. And I must say, I'm going to segue. I have so much apologies. I was reading about the ceremony for Sapling. I was so impressed by Andrew's participation. If I got this right, he was in an airplane, private plane, using some kind of radioactive material as a randomness generator. And I was like,
From Chernobyl.
Chernobyl, right. And I was like, okay, that I don't quite understand it, but that was amazing. So anyway, to compromise that ceremony would again be basically virtually nil, but ideologically, some people have an issue with that. Yeah, so obviously no trusted setup. You don't have to download and store large parameter files. Not requiring a per circuit setup makes it easier for Pollard and future circuit changes to occur. And this is kind of a bonus, and the team can give you more information on this, but Pollard will make outputs and spins indistinguishable from each other. And then, as we've mentioned before, the design mimics Sapling to limit technical risks and simplify adoption and user experience. Rationale 2 of 2, the turnstile allows users to immediately benefit individually. If there's some kind of problem with Sprout or Sapling, Pollard pool funds are not destroyed. Users can elect to migrate at any point. It doesn't need to rely on anyone else to do it. You get a safety benefit without waiting for Sprout or Sapling deprecation. And a new turnstile makes it possible to detect any kind of like Sapling counterfeit or integrity failure, for example. A production deployment of Halo 2, and again, this is part of the rationale, is it enables Zcash, the protocol, to be ready for future features. So we believe that recursive proofs can help us in the scalability area, and Halo 2 makes that possible. So it's beginning to lay the groundwork for some of that. Potential risk: while Halo 2 removes the need for trusted setup, it is a new technology. Of course, as I believe Chelsea mentioned earlier, and Deirdre as well. That's mitigated with security proofs, and honestly, the team has been through several of these type circuit changes, so the expertise and experience of the team is pretty impeccable. And of course, we audit everything. Like our intent for Pollard would be to have 3 different audits at different levels. So another risk: introducing a new address type and pool complicates UX and conceptual flow. That was part of the rationale for designing it, very similar to Sapling, was to limit some of that technical risk and simplify adoption. There's a risk of the ecosystem straddling Sapling and Pollard if a significant portion continues to support Sapling rather than Pollard. So the steps to onboard to Pollard are actually minimal. We'll kind of look at the next slide. And we also have better APIs in code design. So we think it'll be a smoother, we've learned a lot from Sapling, so we think it'll be a smoother process. And then of course, there's the risk that removing trusted setup may not be significant enough to spur new adoption. We've for some time, and in talking specifically with partners and generally watching the market, have been collecting, for lack of a better term, market sentiment data points, and we've begun outreach to some of our specific ecosystem partners that we work with all the time, like wallet vendors, exchanges, miners, mine pools, developers that we know are working on specific projects, etc. In terms of partner onboarding, so in general, the effort to onboard to a network upgrade containing Pollard is really just to upgrade from the Zcash D side to a release that supports Pollard. We're very careful with when we EOS halt releases. We make sure we have 2 releases in the field that support a given network upgrade activation. To onboard to that network upgrade containing Pollard is simply to upgrade to a release that supports Pollard.
Sorry, just to interrupt really quickly. This is
Sure.
all from partners that rely on Zcash D and technology that the ECC supports, correct? This is not looking at those that actually implement the protocol or need to support their own software that implements the Zcash protocol.
No, we put this together from the perspective of partners actually using like Zcash D today, which are the mining
Correct.
pools, the exchanges, the wallet vendors, et cetera. So the current ecosystem partners in production, that's kind of how this was pulled together.
Correct. So this is just those that rely on ECC software. It is not anyone who is implementing the ECC, or sorry, the Zcash protocol directly.
A generic person.
That's the main people that would refer to would be Zebra. And
Yeah.
we have, like, at least from an engineering perspective, we've been taking that into account as well. Outside of Zebra at the moment, almost all implementations, particularly sapling-based, rely on ECC tech at some level. That, for example, they may not use the full Rust crates, but they rely on at least some of them for proofs and things. And so to give an example here, in the Gemini case, for instance, they rely on some of our stack, but they don't rely on all of it. So it's an example of a case where there would be a need for some closer support during an upgrade potentially, but the actual transition from one to the other is something that we're taking into account beyond just people who depend on the outer crates that we provide and Zcash D binaries we provide.
Okay, so yeah, so I mean, mostly the point I want to make is that just saying like, oh, you just have to upgrade from one version to another is a bit superficial of an analysis. And like the analysis I think that's really important is thinking about actually those that implement the protocol as well. So
I think what Stephen was trying to say was that in the case of mining pools, it usually happens to be the case that you just update, and that's not really, it's not really the same thing for the other kinds of partners here.
yeah, that's fair.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think the misunderstanding is over in general. So in general means that everyone in these categories has to upgrade, and they may have to do other things as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there's a distinction between upgrading to continue supporting Zcash without Pollard support, and then being able to add Pollard support to them to their own stacks or to their usage.
Right. So sorry if that wasn't clear, but yeah, no changes are needed for ongoing sapling support. So that was just the general statement. And then here are the specifics, right? So a mining pool, all they need to do is upgrade to a Zcash D release that supports Pollard, that supports the network activation. They don't need to do anything else. If they want to start working with Pollard addresses, then a mining pool would generate a Pollard address and make a configuration change if they're using shielded Coinbase and they want the Coinbase to go to a Pollard address. So that's kind of how this slide's structured, for example. Wallet vendors like Nighthawk and Unstoppable, who are using our SDKs. Again, that's part of the reason for designing those SDKs was for adoption. They get Pollard support automatically, pending, of course, continued work on our part from a UX perspective as well as tech perspective. Shielded hardware wallets, there's some work going on in this area. And essentially it would involve implementing support for the Palace curve. We know that's being implemented now by another project for Ledger already. So that's being done. Block explorers. Block explorers must parse new fields, and I believe those are description fields to fully support Pollard. Otherwise, they wouldn't show you everything they could. And then from an exchange perspective, as Strad mentioned, Gemini uses Zcash D. They have some of their own code calling our APIs, and they currently support sapling outputs. They would need to support Pollard outputs if they chose to do so. Okay, so I think that was, yeah, so that was the last of questions. And I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat, but yeah, let me
I
do
have.
it quickly.
Al-
Okay.
Also,
Yep.
I have
Go ahead,
a
Nathan, or anyone. Yeah.
a comment. So I think this support slide is fairly focused on like rolling out code changes, and I do think we have a good handle on that, but we still need to do the actual outreach to get that information and that feedback. So I expect the trickiest part will be usability issues. So that's a big thing, and so that's why we need to engage with wallet vendors especially about this.
Sorry, one more point. I think this slide does highlight existing partners that already do intersect with the ECC protocol, but I also think that what this doesn't show are exchanges and other wallets not to, for whatever reason, support shielded or support Zcash at all. And I think that's an extremely important data point in thinking about this kind of rollout as well.
Could you, I'm sorry, could you
Sorry,
say
I
that again?
missed. Yeah, I missed some words.
Broke up a little bit in there.
Oh, sorry, just a quick recap. This shows those that have already chosen to support Zcash, like exchanges that do support shielded, but this does not show those that have not, and whether or not this kind of increases a further barrier to entry or not. So I think that's a data point that's also really important to consider, because these are partners that have already chosen to interact with Zcash, but it doesn't kind of show those that have chosen not to for now, and like we would like to, but how that impacts them.
Right. Yeah.
Great.
So again, the goal of this slide was to talk about partners. It's partner onboarding, which implies that they are partners already. Part of the rationale for Pollard and Halo 2 in general is to increase adoption, hopefully through the elimination of trusted setup, to make those people, again, and organizations that have an issue with that ideologically come on board. And but yes, this is just strictly for people using Zcash today. People, when I say people, I mean generically, users, organizations, mining pools, etc.
It's worth pointing out that for an organization that is coming on board, they have the option to only support Pollard and not support Sapling or Sprout. So I'm not sure that's what we encourage them to do, but they have that option.
Yeah, and from the perspective of existing third parties who don't support shielded, not for things like ideological reasons around the trusted setup, it's Pollard, I expect for some of them is not likely to change the calculus. If, for example, if a particular exchange decides for regulatory reasons to not support shielded, like Pollard's intent to be as close to Sapling from a functional perspective as possible shouldn't change the calculus, I expect, on that.
I'm concerned more about complexity maintenance cost for the latter. For exchanges where having 3 different types of Zcash addresses is already complicated enough, where HSM support is low, where just supporting shielded transactions is hard enough, adding yet another one of a different type, even if it's going to be the quote unquote last one, because we don't need any more circuit changes and future network upgrades. We can do them independently. But it's so that's why I mentioned before, if we could tie some sort of deprecation to adding more stuff to the protocol via Pollard, that would assuage that cost on that avenue.
Yeah,
right. It's a good point. And part of what we've tried to do is work that way towards Sprout. Obviously, it's the older pool, by eliminating the ability to send funds into the Sprout pool with the activation of Canopy, for example. You can still send Sprout to Sprout, or Sprout to obviously transparent address.
Very good, important step.
Yeah, so that's kind of
and that means that there's no need for any new wallets, for example, to support Sprout addresses.
That's true.
Yeah, it would be nice to carry that a step further. I know there's an ongoing conversation in the community forum about that. And if there were a proposal to for that being considered in a upcoming network upgrade, that would be interesting to to look at.
Can we?
Those are some
was-
interesting specific mechanisms, but I also want to harken back to Deirdre's general point that like some kind of nudge or whatever the word she used was, like as a general concept, is something. So whether or not those specific mechanisms are the right fit for it, if that makes sense.
Was Deirdre's question about the estimated time for wallets that don't use the ECC
Right, it-
SDKs? Was
Yeah,
that-
there's a couple of lead time questions. in there.
Yeah,
What are
yeah.
the lead times? Just to clarify, what do you mean by lead time? Like how long would it take them to do the kind of the steps that are outlined here?
Yeah.
roughly? Is
So
that what
for
you mean?
example, if Halo were to be Pollard were to be included in NU5,
Right.
how long from like that being like a fait accompli and announced to the community that NU5 will include Pollard, will wallet implementers who don't use the ECC SDKs have and approximately need to get Pollard support into their wallet? I am speaking off the cuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I would think that it would be a short amount of time to get to, if they wanted to get support out as close to Pollard activation on mainnet as possible. I think it would be tight for wallet
so I mean,
developers.
Well,
how many
Go ahead,
wallets are we
Darren.
talking
Yeah.
about here? Because there are wallets that use Zcash D.
Yep. Zec
There's
wallet,
wallets
Zec
that
wallet
use the
Lite.
SDKs.
Right.
And then what other wallets are there? That's
There's
what
some.
There's
what
a bunch of
about
other
Garda?
ones.
I think the only two I'm
Are we-
aware of are Garda has some of their own stack, and then Zec Wallet Lite uses some of our Rust code, and
Yeah.
some of it that's implemented on top.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
they got-
we have helped the editors with Zec Wallet Lite in when they've had bugs related to network upgrades.
Yeah. So I guess the one way to answer this is that at least the way that we're approaching the design of the Pollard components in Rust, their intention is to be much more modular than like some of the existing code was for our sapling support. So, and in fact, we'll be trying to make like even Zcash D's usage of it internally to that as sort of like minimal as possible, delegating to the Rust components. So, so the hope would be there that it will be easier for most people to pull that in as a subunit within their existing code bases, given the assumption that they're already using Rust and are likely already using at least some of our existing code.
Right. And couple updates in the chat from Brad on the wallet team in DC. Garda is working right now to implement the SDKs, and
Cool.
we meet regularly with the DG of Zec Wallet, and we're working to get him using LibRust Zcash, which again, the goal is to make upgrades not just for Pollard, but for anything easier. But I want to clarify one thing I know everyone, in chatting right now understands this, but for someone who might like listen to the recording, like when Pollard activates, a wallet won't break. Like a wallet's not going to break. If they want to work on Pollard support, they would have some hypothetical number of months on testnet, or actual number of months, I shouldn't say hypothetical. And they would have, they would be fine to work on it after it activated, after that network upgrade activated. So there's not like, oh my goodness,
True.
there's break. So and I know everyone's aware of that, but just kind of closing that loop.
I mean, the users will initially, sorry,
Go
carry
ahead.
on.
Darren, then I'll jump in after you.
The users will initially not have Pollard addresses, and therefore the fact that the wallets can't receive on Pollard addresses does not immediately cause a problem.
Well, that's not fully true. So, go ahead.
I have something tangential, I guess. So we can keep talking about I guess, yeah. So let's close the loop on whether or not wallets will break or not, and then I have a point after that.
Yeah, I just want to say I think the usability issue is bigger and trickier. So, for example, let's say, I don't know, Jack's wallet supports only transparent Zcash. Maybe, I'm speculating, I don't know if this is true, but maybe it has the ability to notice if people are trying to send to a sapling address and says, oh, that's a sapling address, we can't help you. But now if there's this new address type that they don't know about, and your friend asks you to send Zec and they give you a Pollard address and you paste it into your wallet and your wallet says this is not a Zcash address, then that adds confusion and friction. So those kinds of issues are important and not necessarily easy to address
Well, I agree
across
that
the
they're
entire
important.
ecosystem.
I kind of don't agree that they're not easy to address because you can just change that error message. I mean, that is literally a one-line fix.
The harder thing about addressing them is that there's many more wallets in that category. There's a lot of wallets and exchanges that support Zcash that don't do shielded.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Basically, the ideal case would be that most of the ecosystem has time to get new support, new address support for future updates if it's NU5 or if it's later, so that we can avoid that as much as possible. And that would include, updates to those that use the SDK and have user-facing things that either the ECC or the Zcash Foundation control to minimize that much confusion as possible. Like, instead of it being unsupported address, we could be like, oh, this is a Pollard address. It is not yet supported on this wallet. Talk to your developer for support or something like that. But ideally, all of our partners, ecosystem partners, would have enough time, where enough depends on the case, to get the best possible rollout as possible.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna jump in now.
Yeah.
This is a really good conversation, by the way. I'm really happy we're having this. So
Definitely.
thank you so much. I guess, like, kind of to build off of all of this, I think there's a focus on, if you support shielded now, what do you need to do to get to Pollard? And that is one viewpoint. The other viewpoint that I think is super critical is, you do not support Zcash at all. And if you only support transparent, those two cases are the things I'm really worried about. Of, if you haven't even made the effort to support Zcash with its current value proposition as private digital cash,
right,
does this make this harder? And we don't want that to be the case. And if it does make it harder, why do we need to rush this through right now? So,
right. I'll give you my quick answer, and then others can chime in. They're much more well-informed. I don't think it makes it any harder at all than sapling, for example, like supporting sapling. And I don't think that there's an exchange out there that looks at this and goes, wow, to support sapling is just way too hard. They're driven by regulatory requirements, right? That's the heavy lift.
Bullshit.
that's not what we've heard from
Okay.
Gemini. So, sorry, I think, was Anthony saying that? Or who was saying?
I heard somebody say something that was like, yeah,
Well,
well,
that
I'm
person-
sorry, but we
I
work
mean,
with
it's
exchanges.
not just regulatory.
That's all we
It's
hear. Yeah, it is.
it's profit.
Partially regulatory. Yeah.
We haven't heard it's regulatory, so that's different than the conversations we've had with
Okay.
exchanges.
Well,
We
I
heard that
mean-
technical complexity that makes. So what we heard in these conversations was not that it's regulatory. We heard it was complexity, and we also heard that really the only reason that exchanges like Gemini have upgraded to support shielded was because they were forced to, or because there was a desire to support users. But what we heard is, please force us to upgrade, otherwise we won't. So that is the message that we got from exchanges.
Hang on. So you're saying, because that was two different statements there. So you're saying they felt forced, or you're saying they are asking to be forced?
Asking to be forced.
By who?
We, their largest customer of shielded Zec, said, you need to implement this feature, shielded withdrawal, or we will take our money elsewhere to someone who will. We forced their hand to implement this shielded feature.
Right.
And
As
so-
a customer, right?
Yeah. We basically said, like, please do this. And they're like, and we're like, okay, that was the carrot. Now this is the stick. We will take our money and leave unless you build this for us. So like,
Right.
okay. And basically they said, like, we would never have done this unless you had forced our hand.
Okay.
And the
One
reason
thing I'll say,
the reason they would never have done it is because why? It's a lot of work. For what reason? For what
For
financial
re-
incentive?
Right.
Does
Dodger,
the click raise hand button work? I clicked the raise hand button a while back.
I mean, I can't see any part of that
It
because I have
didn't
the
make a
slides
sound
up,
if that's
so
what you're
sorry.
asking.
Who's in charge of calling on people?
I'm looking at text and I've never seen any indicator of hand raises anywhere.
I relayed the hand
Oh,
raise.
I'm also
I
raising my
actually do
physical
see
hand
it.
as well.
But
I'll
I
also jump in as you're figuring out how to click raise hands and say that we also heard that another carrot is lots and lots of users.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we need lots and lots of users, or we
Yeah.
can lead by forcing. But those are the two things that move the needle to implement difficult things like shielded right now.
I mean, it's a three-way trade-off. Risk in terms of regulation, which is actually the least important of the three, potential profit, and technical difficulty.
Yes.
Stephen,
Okay,
can you
I'm glad
stop
we're agreed on that.
presenting?
So Zuko does have an official hand up, so I want to make
Can I-
sure he gets to say something.
Real quick. There's different explanations for Gemini's behavior, and I have a lot of insight into lots of different parts of it, and I would say they're probably all partially right. It's certainly not the case that any of them are bullshit.
Right.
Secondly, I think we should plan to sort of acknowledge and use some of these things and not plan to put them to rest during this conversation, but to proceed after. For example, Deirdre said two things, which I'm now struggling to remember. One was, since adding a new address type and new this and that is increasing like certain kinds of technical load, maybe it could be paired with reducing other kinds or something like that. And then we responded in this call by saying, oh, like we could do it with sapling, what we've done with Sprout or whatever. But that very specific proposal might have all kinds of other trade-offs or might be unviable for some other reason, or it might not. But we should remember whether or not that specific proposal of close off inputs to the sapling pool in this specific way, whether or not that would satisfy Deirdre's idea. Nonetheless, we should remember Deirdre's idea as a thing by itself for future like reference after this call. And then the other one, I've lost it. There was something else like that where I was like, yes, and there was an answer, but that's not the full answer. It was,
Sure.
I'm sorry, but
Okay.
basically.
Yeah, and Dodger, you were about to say something about the regulatory aspect of things.
yeah. So I was going to make the point that Gemini really is a bit of a special case. They kind of went out on a bit of a limb to get NYDFS to approve them listing Zcash. So I think what goes for Gemini doesn't necessarily go for all the other exchanges. And I've like Gemini really, I don't want to use the word true believers, but they do come across to me as people who really are massively supportive of the underlying principle behind Zcash.
They're fans, yeah.
Many other exchanges that I have spoken to, many other exchanges that I have spoken to, are more interested in, right? Is this gonna lead to lots more revenue? Is it gonna get us lots more users? And also, they are nervous and averse to doing anything that might in any way disadvantage or harm their relationship with their regulator. So whilst it may be true that for Gemini the impetus was okay, we're going to take our business elsewhere, that doesn't necessarily follow for every other.
Agreed.
Yeah,
for
it totally makes sense that was a big part of it, because that's business and business totally matters.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I've been talking with the founders, those guys, for like 5 years straight, and we've been through a lot of iterations of meeting with regulators with them at our side and all kinds of other stuff. So anyway, let's move on.
I would say that those things really matter, but then add in an extra axis of this is hard to run.
Yeah.
Like how much
that too, absolutely.
than Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, and it's just sort of like, okay, then no.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And the different exchanges have different levels. Like Gemini does everything in HSMs for their signing keys, and that changes everything, and so on. I agree with
So
that.
for the Gemini case, I think sometimes you need a business reason to do what you want to do anyway.
Ooh,
Very
that
true.
reminds me of something else I was going to say, which
Yeah.
is let's have a
Yeah.
Gemini representative in the next version of this call if we're going to be
Ooh.
debating their decision process or asking how they would handle a new thing.
I would love that. I think having having our users in these conversations as we're talking about rolling out features is, I think, extraordinarily important to make sure that we're meeting their needs.
Yeah, and again, just for everyone's benefit, and I'm sure it goes without saying, but we talk with these companies all the time, like every week. We're talking to wallet vendors, exchanges, mining pools, less so, but still, anytime anything comes up.
And can I chime in?
Go ahead.
I think, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't chime in. Let me just say, I don't know what we're planning to do exactly, but it would be in principle a really good idea if we formalized and aggregated some of that chatter that we have every single week with all these different people into, like a document that others like on this call could inspect.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing right now.
Well, then hopefully we can get them. We can get a Gemini person to come. That would be great.
I heard two concerns from folks that I don't feel like we've gotten to because we dug into the benefits and risks of Pollard. So the two concerns were on what timeline and why, and what about other potential priorities, right? And we haven't really dug into those topics, which are huge. And we have like, what, 7 minutes left?
I got time.
How should we approach this?
It's worth pointing out that there are other things proposed for NU5.
Yeah.
So there's transparent Zcash extensions, which is implemented to the point that we could almost run it on testnet now. And I don't think the PR has been merged, but it's ready to merge. And there is
Transaction
non-malleability
malleability.
Yeah. The non-malleability is required for TZEs, but also fixes a long-standing problem with transaction IDs and Zcash.
Yeah, Coinbase.
And the intent is also to make that
asking for
easier to then, for like clients to be able to make, to verify that what they're getting in compact blocks at the moment is indeed from an on-chain block.
And I think the only other thing that's so far proposed is the non-canonical points in transactions, which is a very minor fix.
Yeah.
Didn't Walter Carshot ask a question in text? I don't know whose job it is to collect all the questions in text.
I was trying to get caught up, but
job.
yes, I see it. And yes, Walter, two pools that I know of are using shielded Coinbase, Luxor and Poolin. So yeah, they're already using it, adopted it pretty quickly after it was available. And I think that was the question.
Brad makes a good point in the chat, which is that Unstoppable gave feedback that Zcash was the easiest integration they've done because of our SDKs. I was very pleased
awesome.
with that.
Right. Yeah, that was like a couple weeks. I don't know, like not everything's 2 weeks, but it's not the mythical 2 weeks, but it was just a few weeks worth of work from when they started.
I want to just cycling in a short bit of time back to the like what other things could we potentially get out? And I saw Andrew asked in chat about as a UDA feature advocate, nice hat, about that being in there. At least with the designs that like we've considered ECC, that I've got a draft zip written up. I need to update it, but like that kind of approach for it, that would require a circuit change anyway. So having UDAs in sapling would, if that were the only change we made, would require running another MPC and the associated, like, it's doable, but like, it's a thing that would have to happen, which then adds its own like time period of like delay to be able to deploy that, for instance. Whereas with a Halo 2 style universal setup, adding that kind of functionality into the circuit effectively just requires recompiling the circuit. So A, it's something that you could bundle in, and it's something could be thought about. But B, if it weren't put in, it would be easier to bundle in later on.
Yeah, and there are things that we could do in the current iteration of the circuit, even if we don't include any support for UDAs, to sort of reserve fields in no commitments, for example.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so that's both relative to a version of UDAs that does necessarily require a circuit change, right? So that would be
as far as I'm aware, all
calculus would be
proposals for
different if we could come up. Say what?
If you're going to do it in the shielded, have a shielded UDAs, if you're doing transparent UDAs, that's a completely separate story.
No, shielded UDAs.
Then you have to have some sort of either a circuit change or a transaction format change, because there's no other flexibility in the protocol at the moment to deploy such a thing.
A transaction format change doesn't require an MPC.
No, but that would be what you'd be doing there is adding a space in the transaction format to have some other parallel circuit, which then inherently would be a separate anonymity pool from sapling. Yeah. So like Pollard would also be a separate anonymity pool from sapling, but if you bundled in UDAs into that, then they would share. Whereas if you deploy UDAs without modifying sapling and only modifying like the transaction format, then it's going to be its own thing.
I mean, my concern about UDAs with a separate anonymity set is that, that none of the individual tokens are by themselves going to have a sufficient anonymity set.
Yeah, I agree. I think UDAs are only so interesting and desirable if they are sharing the same anonymity set and are, whatever the other things are shielded, which goes along with that. Yeah.
I wouldn't agree with that.
Well, the only proposal we have for UDAs satisfies those requirements. So, and by the way, we solved a potential efficiency problem. So, my latest proposal for UDAs has almost negligible overhead in the circuit.
Nice.
And no greater security assumptions.
So since we're talking about UDAs, what sort of timeline was the foundation thinking about for developing that kind of feature? Because I think it wouldn't ever hurt to begin talking about requirements, use cases, and usability as early as possible, because that informs also this discussion about should we do Pollard, should we extend sapling? Do we want to have a deep dive on that sometime soon?
Yeah, I mean, if that can be answered by saying we'd like to do a deep dive on that sometime soon, I think that's kind of the best answer.
I want to do so many deep dives.
For sure.
Sorry, I just want to, Andrew, I don't know if you were done.
I was going to add kind of mumbly stuff, but yeah, I mean, we're taking some initial steps to make sure that like we have like resources allocated to like focus very heavily on within the next year.
Yeah, I think so. Just to build on that, we should absolutely do a deep dive. The most we've talked about that. One, this is really important for Zcash users. Two, we're concerned about the rush for new address type and how that impacts rolling out features like this. And how does it change that timeline? So I absolutely think we need to kind of talk about these two things and how one impacts the other.
I mean, for features that require a circuit change, it's going to accelerate the timeline to those features. It's not going to impede it.
Dara, did you have a draft on your ideas on UDAs, or?
I haven't quite written them up yet.
Okay, all right. I was making sure I didn't miss one.
We'll probably fold it into the existing UDAs draft zip.
The one that you opened, Strad?
Yep.
Cool, great.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's only a relatively minor change, actually.
So we have a little time left. I think it would be helpful to look at the planned timeline for NU5 together. Shouldn't we do that? Or should we not do that now? Can we share that?
I can bring it up if you want me to display, let me track it down. Or, I mean, if we fast forward, roughly 6 months from Canopy, we're looking at mainnet activation, sometime June timeframe. Testnet roughly 3 months prior to that. You want me to bring up that graphic we've been noodling on, Nathan?
Well, I like the graphic, but
Okay.
other people might hear June and know what that means. But
Okay, no.
I'm very
I'll,
visual with calendars.
Give me one moment. I'll
November
find
to
it.
June is actually 7 months.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, right. Technically, it'd be May 19th. Would be the 18th. I'm sorry. Would be the actual 6 month. So give me a moment. I'll see if I can track that down.
So we did a little NUP discussion a couple of Arborist calls ago, and we didn't really arrive on any concrete changes to the NUP. So in the scope of the current, how we determine what goes into a network upgrade, how will we determine what goes into NU5? Like literally, what are the human steps that will happen? I know that there are zips, and they go through a process of going through phases, and then there are some zips, and then we either choose them or not. So how do we choose them or not for NU5? Because in the past, it's been kind of just humans eventually agree, and then these are the ones that go into NU5, and then when they activate on mainnet, that is NU5, and those zips go to activated and accepted.
So that is basically the only way of doing it.
Right, but how do we decide what
which humans and what policies they
exactly follow. I want to be explicit about the humans who are going to agree or not, and how and when, about the zips that are going into NU5, whether they include Pollard or not, or anything else or not. It's just
Yeah, the last time that we worked on this, like obviously NU4 was a bit of a special case because we had a singular driving zip, and then we had some ancillaries we tacked on at the same time. Probably if we look at what we did for NU3, I remember we were having like sort of the precursor to these calls where we had ECC and ZF engineers, and I did try and get other people along, but I could basically only get ECC and ZF engineers to the sort of network upgrade planning meetings that we were. And so I remember we went through a series of like, I think 3 weeks in a row. We were sort of like, we'd obviously drawn up over quite some time, the ones we were going on. And then we spent some time sitting down, like in a reasonably small set of like analyzing what combinations made sense, what things were missing, what things were. So I think it would be useful to define like another similar small working group to do like take in the things that are being proposed and do that kind of analysis over like a couple of weeks. Then that could then be used as sort of feedback to the higher level of like ECC and ZF deciding on what they want to support. If that's a thing that people want.
I think those people in a virtual room, are where the rubber meets the road in terms of getting these features out into the protocol in code. So I would be down with basically doing that again with, making explicit about like, okay, these engineers are meeting on the regular to discuss these things exactly.
Yeah. So we've talked about hats earlier. I'm gonna put my meeting host hat on for a moment. We're coming up on an hour and a half, which is probably an exhausting amount of time for some folks. So a lot of great discussions to carry over and carry into other meetings. So I want to wrap up pretty quick, just to respect the time of folks who blocked this hour and a half out to join us. Here's the graphic. We've kind of, as Strad called it, bucket chemistry, to kind of define some rough general timelines for things. If you look at the when Canopy activated, these, of course, this is our 16-week cadence for releases roughly. So that's just kind of those things fall out. And then we kind of backed into, okay, well, if NU5 activated, and let's just say we were looking forward, maybe mid-June, then what does that mean from a release to set the activation height, et cetera? So that's just kind of that straw man. So anyway, be glad to share, this. I kind of recap 2020 on this schedule, and we can obviously I can have this in the next call as well to chat more in depth, and then we can also discuss it asynchronously between now and then, or whatever we want to make sure we cover in the next Arborist call, kind of the carryover from this one, because this has been a great discussion.
Ian Myers was making some points about the risks of new cryptography in the chat. I just want to say that in terms of new cryptography, sapling to Pollard is a smaller incremental change than sprout to sapling.
That wasn't the point I was making. Can you hear me all, by the way?
We can hear you now, yes.
Yeah, sorry. I was making a point about just risks of, like, when you're evaluating risks of doing one thing or another, you have to weigh them on both sides, and none of this stuff is risk-free, right? And we had an isolated discussion of saying, hey, if you do an NPC, there's a risk. And it's like, yeah, I'd argue it's small, but you need to look at them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. We'll look, yeah. So
actually, I just want to very quickly pull out the, so Andrew's just made a point there. I think you might have made it earlier as well, regarding like a soundness proof.
Yeah, right.
I think that's, I don't see any, I've not at least heard any pushback against having that for anything that we propose on deploying on Zcash going forward. We've experienced what happened when something didn't have that, and I don't think any of us particularly want to repeat that experience.
I will insist on that as a requirement.
Yeah, that's where my gray hairs came from.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much, y'all. Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.